Let's have some questions. What over there?
Hi.
We need microphones? Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, now it's working. I am from Cemex, so thank you, Ron, for the plug. Having said that, we are a Mexican headquartered company, but we are the fourth largest building materials company of the world and the largest in the Americas. And we have very successful programs when it comes to Latin America and community outreach, because there are specific things that are needed in those type of markets that we were able to find and give a sustainable solution. In fact, our flagship program just became part of our commercial strategy. It's no longer under the umbrella of the CSR group. It's now in the commercial side. And I invite you to go in our website and you'll find more about it. But we struggle, and this question is to Paula. We also operate in developed markets. So, and we just had an email from our UK public affairs head saying, we're trying to package this so that we can have a story to tell that will be, that people can relate to it, not only in Latin America, but in Europe, where we have huge operations, in Asia. And so how do you come up with I don't know if the right word is the story or a framework or a package of these things without sounding like it's just a laundry list of things that you do that are nice to do? I mean, obviously the same for your business applies to ours. We need a license to operate. We have, quarries, and we have industrial type of operations. But so how do you go about it so that you can get more impact out of it, which is our senior management's frustration, because they know all that we've been doing, but they don't see it outside of Mexico and Latin America and now Colombia and so on.
And that speaks to the noise that you talk about. We are explicit in what we do. And listen, the best scenario is when you have other people talking about what you do. The storytelling is great, and you're telling your story is really important, but the best case scenario is when other people are telling the story about you that you want them to. And we do that in a number of ways, and it requires a lot of relationship building. We provide all of our regions with something called the community framework, and it's got 8 levers in it, and it's got very specific tactics and measurements that we help them think about how to engage their different stakeholders. And we haven't talked about it a lot here. I think it was mentioned in an earlier conversation this morning about the influence and power of NGOs. And those are those third-party, credible people who are doing really interesting things in our markets, and so we will partner with them on research and on different projects. And they bring to the table a certain level of objectivity and also potential for visibility with influencers.
I'll add something to that as a journalist, because corporations try to pitch me on their story all the time. I think, first of all, you have to have a story that's actually a story. And inside this corporate bubble, a lot of times you've got executives convincing themselves that it's some great story, and it's just a yawner. I mean, or it doesn't sound authentic. So I think you have to sort of test your story with some sort of audience. I mean, it depends what kind of audience you're trying to reach. But a lot of people will say, well, a lot of journalists will say, well, that's not really a story. I mean, that's what companies are supposed to do. So you're doing what you're supposed to do. So what?
Or if it's part of a trend or a theme, if you can make it part of that. So maybe manage the expectations of your senior leadership that it's not going to be a feature story. But if you can point to a trend and cite other companies or institutions that are moving in a direction that you are, that might make it more compelling.
It has to be real, though, because everybody tries to attach themselves to a trend, and you wouldn't believe the phony stories people try to dream up and convince you it's something you ought to pay attention to. It's really not. Where did the microphone migrate to? We can bring it over here, right there.
Thank you, Nathan. My question is actually for Matt. We've talked a lot about today, the whole theme here is bold moves. And, Century 21 with the Super Bowl ads, I actually vision as being a very bold move for you. And an outside step in maybe what has been a traditional communication strategy or branding strategy. You mentioned your target audience, females, younger age group. How does that fit with that strategy? And then regarding the bold moves, how did you sell that internally in order to make it happen?
Well, fortunately, I didn't have to sit in on that pitch meeting to the leadership team, so I'm not quite at that level. So I basically just reap the rewards of the decisions that were made on that. But I think every brand needs to continually refresh itself. So I think part of that was we changed our entire tagline from the gold standard to being more agent-focused, Century 21 agent, smarter, bolder, faster. This kind of went in tandem with a leadership change where we had a new president and CEO come in 2010. So I think things kind of aligned to make the perfect storm there to really create a space and an opportunity for our CMO, Bev Thorne, to make that case. In terms of how do the alignments between the different communication strategies work, as I mentioned, the statistics bared it out in terms of us going after the female home buyer, and anecdotally how much power they have in the decision making. But also when you look at the entire 360 campaign, that demographic is extremely important to us as a brand as well, because the incoming realtors are majority female, and the next generation of realtors is also an audience for us as well. So there's a lot of overlap in terms of our message. Now for the sellers, the move-up buyers, the investors, and so on, you're really targeting them in more traditional avenues and spaces, so that you have this constant cycling approach. Real estate is transacted in happy times, birth, marriage, graduations, and sad times, death, divorce, etc. So you're constantly hitting different age groups within those demographics in the different mediums. Our goal there then was, okay, we're getting some good traction with the younger audiences through the social channels and so forth. How do we marry that up now with what we're doing with the Super Bowl ad, with our sponsorship of the U.S. Tennis or Little League World Series, and really get U.S. soccer, getting the soccer moms now to start thinking, boy, I could really use some more space in this house, and then marrying the two. So, having both sets of that strategy really tied it together for us.
Matt, I'm just curious about the Super Bowl ads. Obviously, since you did it twice, you think it worked and it was effective. Can Century 21 quantify a positive return on the cost of that ad, or do you just think it worked great and it made everybody feel good and popular and stuff?
No, I can tell you the system members want to feel good, but that's not enough to care and take care of their investment in the brand. So quantifiable metrics come through the fact that our Century21.com has increased its visitations by, I think it was 120%. I have to get you the legitimate statistics. But when you look at the amount of viewership that's coming through our .com now, which is really our lead vehicle for consumers, it is exponentially increased, and it is literally in a dominant position over in our vertical. So,
and that translates into revenue?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. More questions? Go to this side. Okay, I won't. This side, you got to think up some questions, or I'm going to start going table by table. You can come up with one question per table if you want it to be a collective question.
Paul, if you could start the answer, but I'm curious for all perspectives, how do you go about trying to transfer the equity from the foundation to the corporation?
I mean, we approach our work through shared value creation, or this collective impact. So, I joined the company 3 years ago, and we aligned our themes with what we do as a mining, manufacturing, and engineering company. So we're focused on environment and education. We take a very surgical approach, so we only focus on the regions where we operate. So for example, we focus on recycling because we have a vested interest in getting the metal back on our business side. So we're trying to establish more relationships with municipalities around the country, and specifically in the US, trying to get those rates up, and educate people about changing their behaviors on recycling. We have an interest in sustainable design because aluminum plays a role in building and construction. So we're funding and educating young people and the future architects and designers of tomorrow about the benefits of aluminum, and the same in transportation. So that's kind of how we align. We recognize that we are an energy and a land-intensive business, so we focus on the environment, reduce, recycle, replenish. And that is completely aligned, and we have specific metrics for our engagement programs. to measure, so I can answer the question, did our investments create value not only for society, but also for our stakeholders, for our nonprofit partners, and for the company. I'll give you one example, on volunteerism, which is a little softer, but we bought a facility in Barberton, Ohio, and it was not a good situation. The reputation in the community was very low, and through engagement of employees and volunteerism, we then measured in our engagement scores and saw a dramatic improvement in turnover and retention and productivity. So these are quantifiable metrics that speak to the benefits to the company.
And I think that's the model of success that we're seeing with companies, is when they tie that foundation to the core business, what their brand's about, what their business is about, what they realistically can have an impact on. I think traditionally, oftentimes foundations would, put money into whatever the CEO at the time's favorite charity was, for example. And it really had no tie back to the business, but Alcoa is doing the right way because they can have a greater impact, but also greater synergy between the foundation and the corporate enterprise.
And I can't speak to the foundation part, but I can relate in terms of what we do philanthropically, because a lot of that has a similar take. We have a philanthropic partnership with Easter Seals for the past 33 years, and they provide services for disabled both children and adults. They are one of the largest care service providers for children with autism, living with autism, and they also now have a program for returning veterans. So, but we're constantly looking at, okay, the contribution that you're making as an organization, how is that benefiting the organization? How is it, what is the ROI of that relationship? And you have to look at those things. So, we look at it as, we know for a fact that consumers and home buyers and sellers in particular are more apt to use an agent, a company that has a strong philanthropic background. Our CEO, as you mentioned, kind of tailored his approach toward our existing philanthropic partner because the relationship had been established for 30 plus years. He now sits on the board, but he also is a mountain climber. So he took that a step further, and now he does a climb for kids, and has kind of aligned his own personal fundraising goals and objectives toward the philanthropic partner. We also tied some things back to the relationship, speaking of being innovative and trying to get your message heard and doing things in the right way. We did a match for everybody that liked our page during a certain time of year. We would match a $5 donation to Easter Seals with those people that came in. So I think in terms of building some statistical analysis of how does it benefit the brand to be charitable, those are ways in which you can actually put a check in the box and measure.
Does anybody know if charitable contributions and funding for foundations went down during the recession? I would guess it must have.
It definitely did in our case. And now it's risen again.
Great. In the orange. And then we'll go to the one next to you.
You've all just talked about how you've gotten your employees involved in volunteerism. What have been some of the successful internal communications methods that you've used to encourage that?
Yeah, internal is very important to us, and 80% of our employees are frontline employees. So when we talk about social media and everybody gets really excited about it, that can only take you so far in an organization that has primarily, non-knowledge workers, people who are on the front line. So you have to have your media mix. And so we do some social media that's particularly compelling to our millennials and the professional set in the company. But then we go old school with our employees where we have videos in the break rooms. We put things on the back of stalls. If people have to go to get their electronic pay stubs, sometimes we do some ambush marketing and put some messaging there. So we use kind of a mix of online and offline communications to do that.
When you say internal social media, social media for internal communication, how does that work? Is there like an Alcoa Facebook page that the employees are checking every morning, or?
I wouldn't say they're checking every morning. But again, it's the push-pull strategy. So we have an intranet, and we try to develop compelling stories and content for that. But then There's also, RSS feeds that we push out to people. We are experimenting with Yammer, which is like an internal kind of community, and people can create, Seth Godin says, tribes of different interest groups, our affinity groups, to talk about different topics. So we've been trying that as well.
Yeah, I think the social intranets are becoming very popular, like Yammer, and you can do it other ways. But if it's factory workers, sometimes it can be just having that town hall meeting, or what we have found now, if you send a letter home to the family, it actually gets read, because nobody gets letters from their employer anymore at home. So I think there's lots of different ways that you can engage your employees that way.
Families are key influencers, I would add to that. And on the volunteerism side, if you're a professional services company, or a B2B company, and we did this when I was at Siemens, supporting your executives and your high potentials on nonprofit boards where your customers are, that's relationship. Those are huge, really compelling relationship building opportunities that not only offers development opportunities, but they can connect with their customers in other settings. And pro bono services, there are a few companies that just do an excellent job. I'm involved with some NGOs where consultants are engaged, and now I have a great opinion of those firms and would employ them. So.
And when there's an internal social media effort, employees are encouraged to participate in that on the job, right? You don't have to do it when you go home?
For
Yeah,
internal
Yammer, for
communications?
instance.
Yeah, both, yeah.
So we got another question over here, I think, and then we'll go back there.
So we've been talking about how sustainability activities can enhance your brand. I've got two questions, and one of them is I think most people agree that sustainability is a good thing, but do you feel like there is an understanding of what it is exactly? And then the second question for Matt is, are you seeing a trend of greater interest in green homes?
That's a good question. Sustaining what?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, sustainability has different meanings for different people. I've worked with organizations where when they talk in terms of sustainability, they only mean the environmental aspect. Others it's social and environmental. I think sustaining what? I think it's both your ability to succeed, kind of license to operate, but hopefully also sustaining the resources, because most companies rely on shared resources. And there's recognition that resources do run out, and so we're trying to sustain both business success and the resources that drive that success, and also makes for quality of life for everybody.
And for us, it's sustainability of our business, and it goes back to the three pillars: the environmental, the social, and the economic. So, and there are different things that we measure in each of those kind of areas, but it's exactly as you define it.
What about green homes?
Yeah, I don't know that I would draw a trend line, for the entire U.S., but we do see different pockets where there are significant advances being made in the green home. And not only green homes, more environmentally friendly building materials and so forth, but smaller homes. We're looking at, certain projects. For instance, I'll give you an example in Chicago. Our agent had a listing for a development that was what they called a red line home development that had, it's basically a project that had been abandoned during the crash. This woman and a contractor took on the project. I think there were 12 to 20 homes along one street, and they basically, the woman's a very famous author. It's This Not So Big House is the name of the book. And they developed these homes with, I guess, environmental appreciation in mind, closer to the city, less energy, all of those things that, really were very attractive to today's consumer, that wanted to be in the city, maybe a little bit younger, didn't care about having the big yard, and they sold, that entire, line out within, 6 months, and it was very successful. We also see a significant amount of that type of activity in Southern California, Northern California. So I think it's in pockets, and I think it's continuing to be a factor. And I think as you know, as the recovery takes hold, I hope to see more of that.
Matt, Century 21 sells homes but doesn't build homes, so you're not really responsible for whether it's a green home or not. But do you still try to somehow incorporate that into your corporate reputation, or is that just not for you?
Yeah, no, it's a bit detached. It's more on an individualized basis, so it becomes a marketing factor for the development or for the home.
Okay, in the back.
Paula, is there a story that you'd love to be, your staff to be pitching to Rick, like right now, that you'd love to see in U.S. News? And then, Rick, can you say how you might dust it completely or go home and research it? I'm just curious how that interaction might transpire.
That transaction has transpired
I had
in the
a feeling
past.
it might be that there you were on the panel together, but I just
Go ahead, Paula.
I was never very successful. When I think back to Siemens, I talk a lot about automotive. I don't think I was very successful. But today, one of the things we like to talk a lot about is workforce development, specifically in manufacturing. And so selling that story through has been a challenge for us, but we have a strong conviction that this is a story that needs to stay in the headlines. You know, it grabs it every once in a while, and the president talks about it, but we want to keep it in the headlines because we see the value of manufacturing in terms of U.S. competitiveness. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is trying to dispel some myths about manufacturing. 20% of parents would like their kids to go into manufacturing. That's not good. And so
I'm surprised it's that high. 20%?
20%, yeah. So, we are working on efforts to rebrand manufacturing in the U.S. and try to educate kids about what really advanced manufacturing is about. This is not, the manufacturing of, where you go in with a white shirt and you come out with a dirty one. This is really sophisticated work that's being done at our facilities, and there are career opportunities at a company like Alcoa, where if you go in, and let's say you go in on the front line, you can grow your career to be a manager if that's what you want. You can go around the world. We will pay for your education. So there's a lot of opportunities, and it's still growing. We just announced 200 more jobs in Tennessee today. So in trying to sell this to you, it's leading with some of this research from organizations, like McKinsey that comes out, or Deloitte that comes out with the trends in manufacturing, and what's the new face of manufacturing. And we've been successful pitching that a little bit. We just won the Catalyst Award, which is really extraordinary for what we call a hard hat company. To do that, which, it's...
What is the Catalyst Award?
I'm sorry. So Catalyst is an organization that recognizes companies that recruit, retain, and develop women. And it's the process, the application process itself is very intense. And this year, Coke, Unilever, and Alcoa, and we're one of the few over their history that's won from a hard hat company. To win the Catalyst Award. So we're proud of that. And so we're trying to promote that story of women in manufacturing. And, we've been relatively successful.
So on my end, I get probably 24 story pitches a day. They come flooding in by email. I've actually kind of hidden my phone number these days because I just can't take them all. And almost all of them, I just delete them. It's not because there's anything wrong with the pitch or the story. It's because I have customers too, and that's my readership. And I have to write stories that are for my readers, and I have to write stories that are in my beat. So first of all, I get a lot of pitches that aren't in my beat, and they're just not for me. They might be great for some other writer, but they're just not mine, and that whoever's pitching that doesn't really know what I cover, so that it's just not for me. And then the others, they may be very important stories, but it's not for my readership, or I don't see a way where I can boil that down to something my readership cares about. So the stories I do are the ones where I think there's something important to convey to my readership. And in the instance Paula just mentioned, I can actually see a potential story in that for me, which would be, okay, we're hearing about this manufacturing revival. We're hearing about the skills mismatch. So supposedly, there are a lot of companies that want to hire people, but they can't find the people who have the skills they need for this job, for this work. And high-tech manufacturing is supposedly one of those things. Now, some people are skeptical of that, but the story for me might be to interview somebody who actually is doing this kind of this new type of high-tech manufacturing and find out, especially if it's somebody who converted, like if you could find somebody who went to nursing school and decided to work on an assembly line instead, that might be a story, because that would say that, hey, that's indication that there are jobs out there. So that would address something that's on the mind of a lot of people, which is, where are these jobs anyway, and what skills do I need, and how do I even know what skills I need? Any others?
Thank
Come on,
you.
we have one more. Well, I'll ask a question. We do have a couple minutes left. I want to ask all you guys about how corporate reputation affects hiring and employment. So at conferences like this, I just got back from the Milken Institute conference in Los Angeles. They had a panel about the global competition for talent, the global war for talent. We've heard some talk up here about you want to have the best people, and your corporate reputation matters. So there are about 50 million Americans scratching their head when they hear about this global war for talent, because they can't even get an interview. They may be unemployed, they may be underemployed, they may be trying to get ahead. I mean, clearly there's a humongous mismatch here among companies talking about they can't get enough talent and people who can't get a job. So tell me why corporate, I mean, it seems like it's a buyer's market for for companies. I mean, they can hire, there's a humongous pool of very talented people to pick from, and you don't even have to pay them that much. So why does corporate reputation even matter for hiring when there are apparently so many people available to hire? Why does it matter?
Sure, thanks. No, I think the corporate reputation matters at all levels, whether it's the customer that you're trying to reach, the person that you're trying to bring into the company, and that's from top to bottom. I think in our world it's more important than ever. Our leadership team consistently makes the case. Our reputation is earned and measured on 3 simple metrics. It's the professionals that we associate. It's our local sales agents. It's the brokers that we affiliate. It's the local offices of Century 21 that you have around the United States and around the globe. And obviously we're a real estate company. It's the transactions that we complete. But all of that begins at the local level. So the reputation of the company is critical to bringing in the best talent. And if you don't have the best talent, you're not going to list your home or sell your home with our agent, right? So making sure that you're hitting on all cylinders in terms of your branding, your philanthropic relationships, the leadership messaging that is conveyed through mass media, the image that you're portraying through the social media landscape, all of that is critically important to the success of the business, regardless of whether we're at the top of the cycle or the bottom.
Yeah, and I think, reputation is always important, for those reasons. I think with your question, you have a short-term issue, which is, high unemployment. You have a talent issue, which is a lot of the unemployed people don't have the skills that are needed for the jobs that are available. And those are fairly short-term. Long-term, companies are very concerned about the retirement. We have a large portion of the population that's going to be going out of the workforce. You're going to lose that knowledge and you're going to lose those people. And so talent, recruitment, and retention is very key, because what you can't do is lose all your 50-plus-year-olds and also be losing your 20, 30-year-olds as well, not retaining them, because now you have no knowledge, institutional knowledge.
I thought the baby boomers were going to have to work forever, though.
Well, they might.
They're not. They won't leave.
No, that's Generation X. That's the next generation.
God, I hope,
Baby boomers
I
will have
hope
the
that's not
disposable
true.
income. Okay.
No, but all the studies show, particularly the students coming out of school, Net Impact just recently did a study, and it was pretty amazing. 65% of graduating university students feel like they will make a positive impact socially or environmentally through their work sometime in their career. So obviously they're going to be looking for firms like that. 2 to 1, they want to work for a company that they feel aligned with their values. And so to get that new talent into your company and then to retain them, you're going to have a great reputation. Again, that reputation has to be relevant to those people that you're trying to recruit. And my last point would be is what we're hearing a lot up here is You know, women, very important market. You mentioned women earlier, and I know globally as well, a lot of companies now are investing in women in developing nations because that's the quickest way to have a good, stable society where you can actually run businesses and sell stuff. And all the studies show that women are more concerned about environmental and social issues. And so reputation, as women become more important in the workplace, reputation is even going to be that much more important.
Paula, last word to you, if you want it.
Yeah, I will take it. And we've actually measured our website traffic. So millennials care. They want to work for a company that is aligned with their values and that they feel proud about. Their parents are key influencers, and they care about reputation. And I would argue that they are still very influenced by advertising. But we've looked at traffic to the foundation website of people who come to our company, and it's one of the most traffic sites that we have at Alcoa. So the students are clearly looking to see what we're doing in the community, what our reputation is. And, you know, again, the best case scenario is other people are telling your story for you, but it is still very important.
Well, I hope there's a job at Alcoa for my teenagers when they get out of college. Okay, we're finished. Great discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.